Reverend Father Adrian Mascarenhas, Catholic priest and director of Bhakti Bhavan, which is a place where young men train to become priests, joins us now. And thank you, Father Adrian, for being with us.
Thank you for having me on the program.
How will Pope Francis be remembered? Your personal view?
First of all, thank you for having this program in which we have seen so many beautiful images of the life and contribution of Pope Francis already, as you have shown on Doordarshan. And it's been a great joy to have had him as Pope. So today is both a day of sorrow and a day of saying thanks for this great person and his marvelous legacy. I think that Pope Francis has made a difference to the church not by any special teaching which he introduced, but rather by his warmth, his concern for people, his ability to reach out to others, and his knowledge of what was the right thing to say in different difficult situations. He has steered the church through a number of crises, the most famous being the COVID pandemic, when he was our spiritual leader and guide. But beyond this, there's also the migration crisis, the newly emerging wars in different parts of the world, including Europe, which had not seen a war for many decades. And besides these, there's also different economic and also moral crises which people have been undergoing. In all this, Pope Francis has been our shepherd, and now, to use the biblical expression, we are a bit lost like sheep without a shepherd. We don't know exactly the direction that the church will take. But what we do know is, as a pope, he was a person who was close to all our hearts. He will be deeply mourned and missed. And I think every person feels personally that though we may not have met Pope Francis,
Right.
yet he lives on in our hearts, and that's his greatest legacy. When we speak of his theology or his contributions, I think the most firm is the stand he took on migration and the stand he took on the environment. These two have made a big difference to how Catholics think about these issues. And he's also, when I say Catholics, I should also point out he has reached out not just to Catholics, but to people of all faiths. He has made many trips to countries which have hardly a significant Catholic population. Places like Mongolia, maybe even though there are Catholics, it could be a small minority. So places like Indonesia, Iraq, and other Middle Eastern countries. And wherever he goes, he has built bridges. And that, I think, is one of his greatest legacies.
Father Adrian, now talking about the future, what balance exists, between the traditionalists and the progressives in the Catholic Church to decide the direction that the Church is taking?
As was mentioned a bit earlier by the commentary, Pope Francis has helped to form this College of Cardinals, which will elect his successor. So a lot depends on who gets elected, but it's not really as polarized as maybe in the political field, where you have a clear division between, say, in America, you have the Republicans and the Democrats, and in other countries, you have their own parties and so on, where there's a kind of two poles or maybe more than that, deciding who gets elected. But in the Catholic Church, it's not like that. There's a lot of overlap between conservatives and liberals on different issues, and every person responds to the situation. And so a person in a particular situation may come out as conservative, whereas in a different situation, he's more liberal. So I would say that there's a broad spectrum of views. And of course, some are conservative and some are more liberal. I think that Pope Francis has been appointing cardinals from countries which were which were basically not very well represented in the church. And so it's an exciting phase where they're going to have these people coming from different parts of the world and elect the new pope. And some of these people or their countries have not had a voice in the selection of the pope in the past.
Father Adrian, how much did Pope Francis impact the Church in India?
Oh, he was deeply loved, he was deeply appreciated and cherished, and everyone found him a very warm person, a very good communicator who knew the hearts of his audiences. And he reached out in different ways, both symbolically. For example, we've seen images of him kissing the disabled child. And also in his words, in his actions. I'm sure he really wanted to come to India, and our Prime Minister and our government also extended a heartfelt invitation to him. But sadly, it was not possible. Nevertheless, he has made an impact, and I would like to highlight 2 or 3 points. One is that Pope Francis has stood for a synodal church. A synod is a method of gathering the leaders of the church as well as the people together. So he says it's not only the bishops, but it's also the general public of the church who have to have a voice in the church affairs. And this should be an inclusive approach where people who have not been heard should also get a voice. And so I think this has impacted the church in India. The Catholic bishops have carried it forward by going deeply into this synodality. Another thing is Pope Francis's stand on migration. Of course, it's an issue in many different parts of the world, but hearing the Pope speak about this made us realize that in India also there are many issues of migration which affect different states. Internal migration, for example,
Right.
and also emigration, our own people
Right.
moving out to other countries. And so the church has taken it seriously and tried to address this. There were other aspects of poverty and so
Sure.
on where Pope Francis has, in a way, he has appreciated the work of the Indian church, and he's
Yes.
even quoted the Indian bishops in some of his own documents. So he's quoted what has been done in India as an example for the world to follow in certain areas like poverty, for example. I
Right.
think that we are yet to learn a bit more from him in the field of inclusiveness and in the field of environmentalism, where Pope Francis has many teachings which we can still imbibe in India and where his impact still needs to be deepened.
Okay, we leave it there. Thank you very much, Father Adrian Mascarenhas. Thank you for joining us and
Thank you for having me.
putting this all into perspective for us.